I first got to know him probably 2 or 3 years ago after I found one of his tweets. He was talking about being a lobbyist for Coca-Cola or working as a consultant for Coca-Cola. And he was in the room during a meeting when Coca-Cola executives were essentially strong arming the government, saying, if you don't include Coca-Cola on the food stamps program, then we're going to accuse you of being racist. I reached out to him because I thought, what an extraordinary story. This exemplifies the corruption, the ideological corruption, the financial corruption that is in our healthcare industry, this revolving door between big food and big pharma and the federal government. I interviewed him on the show. Since then, he has been all over the country. He's been on Joe Rogan. He's been on Tucker Carlson. He is an advisor to RFK Jr. in this MAHA movement. He's an advisor to President Trump during this transition. With me now is Calley Means. Calley, good to see you, my friend.
Oh, so good to see you, Liz.
It's been such a joy seeing everything that you've done since we first met. I'm extremely proud to see what you're doing. I want to start out before hearing what it's like behind the scenes. I know right now you're working with Bobby Kennedy, with the Trump team, on transition stuff related to Make America Healthy Again, and we're going to get into all of that today. But I want to show this video of RFK Jr. talking about his experience with Trump, because it wasn't just a campaign tactic, right, to say that this is a unity ticket. RFK Jr. is going to play a big role in this administration,
Yep.
and this has been his experience and how his mind has changed on President Trump. Take a look at this.
So that's the way he thinks about things. He doesn't care what you believe. He doesn't care what your ideology is. He's going to make the decision himself. And I've been so impressed with that. It's completely changed my opinion of who he is and really convinced me that this guy that I had such contempt for, such disdain for, is actually, a really extraordinary leader, that he could be one of the great presidents in history.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay, Calley, for those, a lot of people on this show know you because we've talked to you several times. Some people may just be introduced to you for the first time. You're the guy that's usually sitting next to RFK at these events. You've been on tour with him. We're going to show another video in a little bit of you and Bobby talking together. But talk to me a little bit about that dynamic that Bobby was describing in that video between he and President Trump as this transition happens.
Yeah, I mean, just personally speaking, I've gone from, when President Trump first came down the golden escalator 10 years ago to thinking he's a threat to democracy, to believing that this election is by far the most important victory of our lifetime. And I think a historic moment in American history where I've never been more excited about a president being elected. I've been on the same transition, I think, as many first-time Trump voters who were brought in through these big issues he's talked about. I mean, from my standpoint, real quick, my story, Liz, is, my sister and I got into this from her experience being in the medical system, from me being a lobbyist, and our mom abruptly dying of cancer, one of the many Americans struck down by our chronic disease crisis. And we started companies, we wrote a book, we started going on podcasts. I've known you, as you said, for years. And just organically, this beautiful movement has sprung up. We got connected to RFK, got connected to the Trump campaign, just reached out. Hey, this is kind of interesting. We want to fold this into President Trump's talking points. Members of Congress reached out and had an opportunity, had a spiritual feeling after President Trump got shot. I just felt the need to pick up the phone and call Bobby Kennedy, who I've been talking to a lot, and say, maybe this is time to call President Trump and discuss unity, and was able to make that connection that night with the help of Tucker Carlson, and have a little bit of a seat watching them connect. And I think what's so powerful, and what I think people are so scared about, is there was a real meaningful connection on big ideas. And I think that almost spiritual level of connection came through in the campaign, to where I was shocked, in the final weeks of the campaign, President Trump talking about our food toxins and, childhood chronic disease, and taking on corruption in the USDA and the FDA and the CDC. It's like, these are bipartisan issues. These are anti-corruption issues. These are us versus the uniparty. And I think, as you saw, Liz, these issues connected with, I think, the base. I mean, you heard really loud applauses. Trump was shocked, he said, by the applauses RFK and these issues were getting. And I think it brought millions of new people into the coalition. When you look at the gender gap closing, independents, young people, Latinos, I mean, I think this really, really resonated. And I got to say, from my standpoint behind the scenes, this was good vibes. like I've never seen a partisan or kind of calculated word exchanged in the closed door sessions. It's all about how can we actually communicate this childhood chronic disease crisis. So on this particular topic, And I think in a lot of topics, honestly, when Trump was working with Elon and Tulsi talking about big ideas, it honestly was coming from everything I've seen, a very good place.
Okay, guys, I canceled my health insurance. We called and we quit. We said, listen, we're not going to be a part of a system that's so corrupt, so confusing, so expensive. I am tired of paying an expensive monthly premium and then not having my claims covered. Did you know that 1 in 5 Obamacare claims were denied last year? That's unacceptable. Unacceptable. I want to introduce you to what my family and I are doing instead of insurance, how we get assurance. We are now part of the crowd at Crowd Health. Crowd Health is so amazing. It's not health insurance. It is a better way to pay for healthcare through crowdfunding. And it came as a result of our modern healthcare system being such a headache and so corrupt. Now, when Crowd Health joined this show as a sponsor, as a partner, I was unsure if they were the real deal or not. So I did what I do. I picked up the phone and I called their CEO and I said, listen, you call it crowdfunding. All these different people join this group and you submit your claims. If you go to the hospital, you go to the doctor, you have a health event, you submit the claim and then it's crowdfunded. Everybody pitches in and helps you pay off the bill for your health event. I said, does this really work? Are people's bills really paid? Is this really assurance that if you have a really expensive health event, you're not going to be stuck with a bill? And listen, what I will tell you is I was so confident after talking to the CEO that I quit our health insurance and signed us up for Crowd Health. It's just $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more. Compare that to how much you are paying for health insurance right now per month. You can get access to a community of people who are willing to help you in the event of an emergency. That means access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more, and all without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you and like me, who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months. Go to joincrowdhealth.com. Use my promo code Liz. Crowd Health is not insurance. You can learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com. Use promo code Liz. Well, what's so interesting is they say that in 2016, President Trump won because for the first time he gave voice to the forgotten working man. And it's actually the same thing with the Make America Healthy Again movement. Think about all the people in our country. I mean, you know the numbers better than I do, although I have also personally suffered from this, which is why it resonates so much with me.
Yeah.
It's another forgotten man issue. Bobby, and by marrying Make America Great Again with Make America Healthy Again, President Trump are saying to all these people, all these children, all these women with autoimmune diseases, the people who have suffered cancer and obesity and diabetes and heart disease, hey, I see you. I see what you're suffering. You don't have to suffer this. I will be your champion against these big interests. So in a sense, it's a mirror of exactly what caused that first wave to happen, which is quite something to behold. But the practicality, this is what I'm so interested in hearing your behind the scenes take, what's to happen. We've heard a couple of promises from Bobby in the past couple days. One of my favorite ones is that he's going to take all the nutritional scientists out of HHS and either fire them on day one, or if he's not allowed to fire them, he's going to build a new headquarters for them in Guam. He says this funnier than I do. So go ahead and take a look at this.
What is your plan to make this work once this election is
And that's
over
you in the
with?
middle, by the way, for anybody wondering.
What Calley has tried to do is not talk about anything that we have to push through Congress. Because anybody who tells you that they are going to change a law that requires congressional approval is, let me say, they're being over-optimistic. And I, during my campaign, have never made that promise. I've said, if you've got to go to Congress, I can tell you what I'd like to do. I can't make any promises. What we have figured out, and what both of us have spent a lifetime between us studying, is how to change things through executive order, through policy changes, and through regulatory changes, and personnel changes. And many of the laws are on the books that already require good behavior. It's just that they're being skirted through agency capture. So we're going to change the personnel at the agencies. We're going to fire on day one, or if you can't fire them, we can ship them to a new HHS headquarters in Guam. Every nutritional scientist at FDA, because all of them are corrupt. and all of them are complicit in the poisoning of our children. NIH has a $42 billion budget, and just for scientific research, and it distributes that budget among 56,000 scientists at universities, mainly across the United States. And those scientists have been working on new drugs to treat chronic disease that can be turned into weaponized by the pharmaceutical industry to serve their profit ambitions. And we're going to go in at day one, and we're going to change the focus of this agency, and we're going to find out what is causing the chronic disease epidemic. For 30 years, CDC and NIH have looked at this autism epidemic and said, we don't know we know it's not vaccines. We don't know what's causing it. Well, we're going to find out what's causing it. We're going to do that in a couple of months. And once you have the science out there and you can tell the truth to the American public, two things happen. One is you give people choice. We're not taking choice away from anybody. If you want to eat Dunkin' Donuts or packaged foods, you should be able to do that. You're an American. But we're going to give you the information. We're going to make them put it on the label. This is going to cause ADHD.
Okay, first of all, I have an emotional reaction watching this. I actually want to cheer because it's going to change so many people's lives, Calley. This stuff is a big deal. So first I want to talk about big pharma, then big food. What are the big pharma implications of this? Like, talk about the childhood vaccine schedule. If Bobby Kennedy is in charge of our healthcare system or of HHS, are we going to see new studies? Are we going to see the childhood vaccine schedule reduced, not recommended? Are we going to see it completely obliterated and the government not get recommendations? Like, what are the practical implications of this?
Yeah. So I think what Bobby has said, and it goes directly to the vaccine question, is we're going to return to science. I think what bad interests have realized is that there's nothing higher level in society than an NIH study. And I've actually, Liz, had conversations in the past 3 days with the senior most members of the NIH who are defending the institution publicly, who are saying this is an absolute and utter dumpster fire. There's huge DEI regulations and parameters around what can and can't be said, a feeling of absolute assault on academic freedom. And from what I'm hearing, when you add it up, 80 to 90% of NIH grants and funding goes to pharmaceutical R&D. There has been an absolute freeze on foundational scientific research, and we just need to call a spade here, a huge institutional force from preventing embarrassment to previous guidelines, whether that's on pharmaceutical interventions or on food. What President Trump, and some bold statements and videos the first day, is we're going to get back to freedom of speech. We're going to get back to truth. We're going to get back to academic freedom. We're going to get, any type of ideology out of our scientific guidelines. He said that directly. And that's the key to everything. I mean, the key and a victory in the first year is returning the NIH to asking the question, why are we getting so sick? You talked about the forgotten voter. I think there was a primal scream for the forgotten child. I mean, why are 1 in 20 children born today in California, why do they have autism? Why? Well, like, what is the reason? Why did the USDA recently has leaked 38% of teens have prediabetes? I mean, that's unthinkable. It's a moral scandal.
Insane.
Why is cancer rates this year at an all-time high among teens? Why are, all of these conditions among adults leading to lower life expectancy, where we live 6 years less than an Italian? These are all interconnected. That's what my sister and I from our earliest conversation have been talking about, what our book's about, is like the chronic disease crisis is interconnected. It's about food. It's about the fact that 70% of diet is ultra-processed food. It's about sleep. It's about sunlight. It's about movement. We're so sedentary that 77% of men of military age can't join the military. It's about our over-reliance on pharmaceuticals that are obviously causing issues to our cells. The fact that 40% of teens are on a pharmaceutical of some kind. So this is a real problem, and we just need basic research. And I think, Liz, if we can win that battle of not any ideology from the research, but just true research on why we're getting sick, fearless research, then I think policies and various recommendations flow from that. a lot of people have been asking, okay, so how does RFK, what he's saying, square with the anti-regulation agenda of President Trump? I think that's really thinking about it the wrong way. Our institutions have been captured, right? There's nothing conservative or liberal about the USDA recommending added sugar as part of a healthy 2-year-old's diet. That then flows to hundreds of billions of dollars of various subsidies. I think a huge problem, and I think Trump talked about this with his first video. Let's get the DEI out of all the federal agencies. DEI has actually infected science in a really problematic way, where the dietary guidelines actually have to consider affordability. They have to consider equity. And actually, they recommend ultra processed food to kids because they say, well, we can't possibly expect people to afford real whole food. You should have zero thought about equity or affordability in scientific guidelines. The job of the USDA is to say the truth, which is that in the midst of a diabetes and obesity crisis among 6-year-olds, that we should be steering kids away from ultra processed food, away from sugar, towards whole food made by American farmers. And that's the USDA's job. That's the executive branch's job. There's actually no policy there. That's but that recommendation should be from the science, and then policymakers and money can flow where we see fit. But the problem is that you actually have fear in these scientific agencies about saying the wrong thing and getting attacked for being classist. That's got to end. We need unbiased science about what food's doing, what vaccines are doing, what fluoride's doing, all these things. Why are we so afraid to ask these questions?
Well,
Science is
profit is
ongoing,
the
and
answer.
I think that's
Profit is
right. I
the answer.
think,
Go ahead.
yeah, I think that's right. No, I think that's right. I think that's right. It's profit, and it's just demonstrable that we've said this again and again. RFK said this. It's not conspiratorial. It's just true. A sick kid is profitable for the healthcare system.
It's terrible. It's so, I mean, think about that. It's so terrible. Okay, guys, as we move closer to the holiday season, I've already started listening to Christmas music, by the way. The day after Halloween is the day for me that I start singing Christmas carols with my kids. Let me tell you about 2 products that you have to get for your family. You can get this for your wife, you can get this for your husband, you can get this for your parents, your sister, your children. Let me tell you, Cozy Earth's bamboo sheet set. I have this on my bed at home and they are absolutely heavenly. Cozy Earth also just sent me their bath towels. It's bath sheets, bath towels, hand towels, washcloths. These are some of the nicest bathroom towels that I have ever used, because sometimes when you get the really fluffy ones, they get almost crusty. At first they're really soft, but then they get crusty after you put them in the dryer. Or the thinner type don't really soak up the water, especially if you have as much hair as I do. Not so with Cozy Earth. I love Cozy Earth sheets. Or Cozy Earth towels. They soak up everything and they are so soft. And the reason for this, I was talking to them up to Cozy Earth about this. They're made from 100% premium viscose from bamboo, which is why they are breathable and uniquely soft. They actually seem to get softer every time you wash them. Cozy Earth's thesis, or their purpose, is to turn your home into a personal sanctuary, which is why these are such amazing gifts for Christmas. They want you to be able to use your home to escape the hustle and bustle of life, and Cozy Earth just adds that cozy, wonderful touch to it. So, highly recommend you get this for your family. Wrap the ones you love in luxury with Cozy Earth. You can visit cozyearth.com/Liz. If you use my exclusive 40% off code, LIZ, to give the gift of luxury this holiday season, you will get a lot of money saved. So you can get more people more gifts. That's cozyearth.com/Liz. And if you get a post-purchase survey after you make your purchase, say that you heard about Cozy Earth on the Liz Wheeler Show podcast. That's cozyearth.com/Liz. Use my promo code LIZ. And I think it's worth noting, too, for conservatives, I think there's been a move away from libertarianism in the conservative movement, where we're not sitting here, and this is true for at least me. I know many of the people watching this show probably feel the same way, where I used to be very anti-regulation, like, get off my lawn, government shouldn't be telling me what to do. And now I'm not so much just in principle anti-regulation. I'm anti-bad regulation. I'm anti-immoral regulation. There is a role for government to regulate things that are harming people, to regulate things that are immoral for people. There is a role for that. So I, for one, would like to see the federal government ban brominated oils or synthetic dyes in children's foods. That's poisoning our children and causing it. Can we expect to see some of those things actually illegalized in food in our country?
Yeah, let's just go really. I mean, we've talked high level throughout the campaign. I think we're at a generational moment for specifics. So let's get really specific on this. And what we're preparing for President Trump's consideration and consideration by the transition team. Well, when you get into food regulations, you get into what's called GRAS standards. So generally recognized as safe. So there was a bill passed in the 1950s basically saying that things are just that are absolute no-brainers, like food additives that are just natural no-brainers, that they can be, okay, those are good to go. And through various corrupt regulatory interpretations today, it's full self-policing from the food industry to where a food company can add any chemical whatsoever into our food system. And then it can only be taken out if it's demonstrably proven that it's harmful after it's been in our kids' food. And we have 10,000 chemicals in our food that are phased out of European countries. And we have full self-policing. Now that isn't the free market. It's been a totally rigged system. And I would just say, like, let's take food colorings, artificial food colorings. That is literally crude oil. One thing I'd love the USDA to and the FDA to pursue is actually just more honest labeling of what food products are. Natural flavors encompass thousands of harmful chemicals. Red 40, that's crude oil. That's literally what it is. So we are coloring those neon colors in our kids' food that have no nutritional need. That's phased out of every other developed country. And it's absolutely demonstrably tied to ADHD and other neurological issues. I mean, it's astounding, Liz. You've seen this probably, right? If you actually, a kid with some ADHD issues, if you take food coloring out of their diet, it's actually astounding. Studies are showing this. But instead, we just give them Adderall. So yeah, I think it's not an attack on and we got to just be, as you said, very specific. I think the overall posture of the FDA should be actually a lot of deregulation. I think we should have a golden age of innovation and drug development. Nobody's staying in the way of that. But when it comes to food, when it comes to generally recognized as safe, it's complete self-policing from this industry, allowing them to put chemicals in our food that are banned in every other country and have hundreds of studies saying are harmful. Yeah, there needs to be a review of GRAS standards. Absolutely. Now that I don't think that's punitive on the food system. I want to make this really clear, and this is what we're talking about. This is a dual fault. The government and the food industry has created a regulatory regime and a subsidy system that's led U.S. food to not be nutritious. Why does the U.S. have the best, healthiest, most nutritious food in the world? Why are food industry leaders calling me right now off the record and completely acknowledging that the food in Europe, the processed food, is healthier, is much better? Why isn't the U.S.
Why is that?
Because the culture and standards in Europe, they don't allow crude oil to color food. They're phasing out.
You actually reposted this on X. I think it was yesterday. It was either yesterday or the day before. You reposted a story, and I've heard this so many times anecdotally from friends. There's always stories like this floating around on X of people who go to Europe and they eat pasta, they eat bread, they drink wine. They're not, let's just say they're not eating, just veggies and hummus to try to lose weight, and they end up losing weight eating all of these carbs. And they come back to the United States, they work out more, they're back in their regular routine, and yet they gain weight.
Yeah.
What are the differences? Is it just dyes, or what is the difference between even their carbs there?
Well, Chamath Palihapitiya just posted that too, and a lot of people post that. So this actually gets to why we need to blow up the USDA nutrition standards. So what nutrition researchers who are paid by food companies do is they look at these dynamics where 80% of the American people are obese or overweight, and we have disastrous health outcomes compared to every other developed country. And they sit around in a circle endlessly and say, is it the glyphosate? Is it the food colorings? Is it the BHT preservatives? Is it the seed oils? And they have endless conferences, and they sit in these 5-year cycles of the USDA nutrition guidelines and just fight about, and it's a game. It's a total game, right? The issue is that we are relying too much on ultra-processed food, which includes grains, which in the United States specifically are sprayed with many types of pesticides and herbicides that almost all come from China, that are phased out of the EU food supply. Because, Alex Jones actually was right on some of these things. I mean, some of these chemicals that are sprayed by the truckload on our food actually are feminizing agents, are estrogen producing agents that do actually change the gender of frogs that swim in the water runoff of our fields. I mean, that is absolutely happening, actually.
Funniest conspiracy theory that ever came true, by the way, hands down.
So debating, whether it's the glyphosate or whether it's some other ingredient, it actually loses the point. And it's kind of, I think, the spiritual strain that RFK hits. It's what Good Energy, our book, is about. we need to actually just reassert common sense. Like, we shouldn't be eating grains that are sprayed with pesticides that require the workers to wear a hazmat suit that kill everything in sight, that are being phased out of every other country. Like, clearly that's impacting our microbiome, which regulates many of our hormones in ways we don't even fully understand. Like, we're not going to have that science. Our body is this absolute awe-inspiring interconnected machine, and it just totally misses the point to try to isolate. If we literally, and I mean this literally, fired every single nutrition researcher in the United States government and cut all funding for nutrition research to zero, and replaced that with a standard that we should lower ultra-processed food consumption for kids from 70% to 20%, we'd have a transformation of human capital in this country, a mass increase in life expectancy, and our economy would be on fire, because what we're doing by having 38% of kids as pre-diabetic is we're ruining their futures and actually ruining their future human capital. So that gets to the type of principles that we're looking at. We got to return to simplicity. I'm actually getting a lot of messages from various nutrition researchers saying that we have to have a 20-person panel to advise RFK on what specific ingredients. We need to have a mass panel of debating seed oils and all these other things. No, we need to actually use this mandate to get back to simplicity. Simplicity. That's the key. I think a lot of evil forces are hiding in the complexity of our dietary debate.
Yeah, like you don't need a panel to tell you that crude oil shouldn't be in our children's lunch, and that
yeah, I was literally
that pesticides that you have to wear a hazmat suit to spray shouldn't be all over our grains. That doesn't require a panel. That just requires, as you said, it requires common sense. So let me go back and ask you. So you said that we can expect studies that adhere to the science, regulations that actually make sense. Some of these studies I'm interested in. So oftentimes, especially among moms who are part of the Make America Healthy Again movement, there's concern about the vaccine safety standards. It's common knowledge among those moms that there is not a double-blind study that compares the outcome of vaccinated children to the outcome of unvaccinated children. And the justification for that from the public health sphere is that it's immoral not to give children vaccines to actually compare them. Are we going to see a study such as that so that we can actually see the comparative damage that vaccines cause, or how dangerous or not it is not to give your children vaccines in childhood?
Let me give the framework that I think Bobby's talking about and that we're certainly talking about and recommending for the new administration, which is that nothing is too important to subject to science. I mean, we should not be afraid to conduct science on particularly interventions that we're giving and essentially mandating for every single child. So the argument that vaccines are too important to study, when demonstrably there are terrible incentives of the vaccine schedule to where companies invest billions of dollars on new development, and then the second they're able to lobby to get something on a schedule, it's the only product in America that the government pays for every single American citizen, and then uses the regulatory agencies and the media, which the pharma industry funds, to call anyone who questions that schedule a war criminal. We can be generally supportive of vaccines and admit that the incentives of getting new and more vaccines on the schedule are extremely problematic. I would say anyone that's actually stepping back and looking at the situation would probably say some vaccines maybe have been good. There's probably almost certainly issues with the schedule. That we probably have too many on the schedule, that we should analyze how our schedule is different than other countries, that we should trust American parents to make the best decision for their kids. They always talk about these polls of vaccine support is very high. Well, what about a poll saying, should the government mandate parents what to give to their children? Immune system changing shots. Should parents have decision on what they give? You'd have 95% support on that poll. So I just think what we're seeing that I think is positive is there's like these guardrails of what we can and can't talk about, and almost like really I think demonstrably evil forces. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry profits from more and more Americans being sick, demonstrably, like that's not in dispute. Yeah. Like the pharmaceutical industry profits from us being sick. The two largest vaccine makers are foreign companies that have settled multi-billion-dollar criminal penalties for falsifying data. Like the fact that there's this hands-off to that, and the fact that it's so important that it's actually dangerous. This word "dangerous" used to even question that. I think that's the paradigm that we're trying push back on. And I think principles that we're certainly talking about are absolutely fearless science and trusting patients, dismantling mandates, letting the science lead, to decisions on taking drugs off the market, things like that. 30% of pharmaceuticals are taken off the market at some point due to
Right.
post-approval safety.
I know. My husband and I have this joke that anytime we see a pharmaceutical ad on television, just wait 18 months and there'll be a class action lawsuit against that same
yeah.
pharmaceutical.
Well, it's
And
happening
it's
with
like,
Ozempic, which is a disaster.
totally. It's like funny, not funny, because it's true. So I guess a couple of questions based on what you said. One of the problems too with vaccines and their manufacturers and the corruption there isn't just the revolving door, it's the lack of liability that the manufacturers have. So if a child is harmed by a vaccine, the manufacturer has no incentive to say, okay, why are you harmed? Let's make sure that this is safe, because the government just pays out the liability lawsuit. The company itself never suffers any or never is held accountable. They
Yeah.
have no responsibility. Is that on the agenda to change that? Because it seems to me that that's one of the root causes of the incentive to get as many on as quickly as possible without any safety standards or with nebulous safety standards and very few
Yeah.
studies, as they just don't care if it harms people.
We have the opportunity to have a golden age of innovation, including pharmaceutical innovation. But this idea that there's no liability protection, this idea that you're basically called a war criminal for questioning any vaccine, and the fact that everyone's grouped together, that we're not even differentiating when they're given. I mean, there's nuance in all of this. Like obviously, hepatitis B on the first day of birth makes no sense. It's indefensible. Like I've yet to hear a defense of it. If the mom is tested for hepatitis B, the literal answer from scientific authorities when you press them on that is that the American people are too stupid to remember, so we might as well just give it to everyone. It is an STD, okay, or intravenous needles. Never in American history has a child tripped on a needle that just had hepatitis B on it and got. It's ridiculous, right? So maybe that is a important intervention for many Americans, but the timing is like, but even question the timing. You're anti-vax. Every reporter I talked to even insert nuance on 72 immune system changing interventions before a child reaches maturity is anti-vax. That is the problem I think the American people are pushing back on. And I think this movement is much wider than this issue. But I think it's like, why are we prevented from asking a question about that? Why is the medical system mobilizing so much force to prevent any questions or any discussion of that issue? But then when it comes to childhood obesity, childhood prediabetes, child diet, it's hands off. It's way too expensive to possibly intervene. It's $1,600 for Ozempic jabs. Fine, Medicare approved that. Healthy food for kids, not possible, right? It's you are a war criminal if you're a single lower income mom to not give 72 shots on the exact day that they're recommended, even if your child is immunocompromised or is sick. CDC recommends to give it the shot. Don't miss anything. Versus, hands off on what you're feeding your kid, and actually added sugar and Coca-Cola and food stamps and all this other stuff is fine. And the American Academy of Pediatrics has nothing to say about that. It is obviously wrong where the industry is focusing. And I think vaccines are an important part of public health. I think the message is they should absolutely be subjected to science. Parents should absolutely be able to ask questions. Parents aren't trying to hurt their kids, right? And I think the more
what's funny,
we can
you mentioned that the hepatitis vaccine. After my first daughter is almost 4 years old, after I gave birth to her, I declined the hepatitis B vaccine on the day of her birth because obviously I don't have hepatitis B, so she's not going to have it unless she's a prostitute someday. I'm not going to give it to her on the day of birth. And after I declined this, about a half an hour after I declined it, they sent a neonatologist into my room to try to pressure me on it. And I said to her, I was like, why do I need to give this to my daughter if I don't have hepatitis B? And she was like, well, you could get into a car wreck on your drive home and your newborn could need a blood transfusion and that blood could be contaminated with hepatitis B. And I got to tell you, Calley, I have spent 4 years wishing that I had looked at her and been like, How many times a year does that scenario happen?
Zero.
And I, of course,
Ever.
didn't because I just given birth. I was sleep deprived. I was hormonal, and I obviously didn't give the shot. But I was just like, can you believe that kind of emotional manipulation? Which kind of brings me to my next question, and that's medical schools. Like, sometimes I do make fun of doctors who are ridiculous, like that woman was, but they're actually just practicing how they were trained. All of these doctors are not
Yeah.
like bad people who are trying to harm their kids. It's that medical schools teach them that this is the standard of care. This is the only way you practice. Any other way is invalid. How do we change that, given that Trump has said he wants RFK not just to be in charge of reforming the FDA and the CDC and big food and big pharma? He wants him to be in charge of the healthcare system.
Well, they're not bad people, but 80% of a pediatrician's office revenue is generated from vaccine appointments.
Terrible.
So, like,
Terrible.
we should be able to, like, to me, this is a free speech issue. Like, to me, this is an infantilizing of the American patient issue. It's like, we should have the ability as Americans to ask questions about everything. Like if the vaccines are one of the most important inventions in American history, which could be true, that should be subjected
I don't think so.
to. And I agree. I mean, whatever you are on that question, it should be subjected to continuous scrutiny and continuous debate. There's also cost benefits, right? It's very possible, and this is disputed too, right? But it's very possible that vaccines wiped out some conditions. It's also possible that a child on a vaccine schedule on a population level, has worse overall health outcomes than somebody that didn't get the vaccines. Then you can cost benefit of that as, is it worth to continue to have these various conditions maintained at zero? I mean, there's complicated questions. It's science, right? And it's just like this infantilizing that nobody can ask a question about it is problematic. So getting to med schools, I think it goes to incentives too. I mean, by my math, more than 50% of Harvard Med School's budget somehow touches pharma. Pharmaceutical money is the lifeblood of academic research. It's, when Casey was at Stanford, opioid makers gave a multi-million-dollar grant to reform the curriculum. So the Stanford curriculum was actually reformed. It was literally directly tied to curriculum development for Stanford Med School.
Wait a second. At Stanford Medical School, the curriculum was written by Big Pharma?
Yeah, when Casey was there, the dean was named Philip Pizzo, and he was an opioid specialist who received personal consulting payments from opioid makers and accepted a donation of millions of dollars from opioid makers for the specific earmarking of, it was actually the word ethics was in there, ethical, this is in our book, ethical curriculum development. And he served on the board. No, and he served on the advisory committee at the NIH, I believe in 2011, Philip Pizzo, that recommended wider prescription for opioids, saying that they weren't addictive. So this is how it works. And, it gets to Casey not taking one nutrition class at Stanford Med School, and 80 to 90% of doctors today graduating medical school without taking one nutrition class. I think what the MAHA movement, is really saying is it's not pro food or woo-woo, exercise interventions or whatever, and it's not anti-drug. We should have a health system that steers health incentives to the best clinical outcomes, period. It could be a drug, that could be exercise or food. Well, my point is why is there a bill to ship $1,600 per month for every obese or overweight American to a company based in Denmark, rather than ship that money to American farmers, to improve and fortify our food system and help our struggling American farmers? What's the clinical root cause of our obesity? Is it the fact that people go and lose 20 pounds and they go to Europe and eat a bunch of pasta? Maybe we should actually look at our incentives. I think a key way to create a revolution in America of agriculture is to just follow the clinical reality and see the diabetes, the heart disease, even the cancer, the obesity, all these conditions that are driving up the health budget are actually tied to metabolic habits, including food. And if the research from the NIH continues to show that, it influences the clinical guidelines. When you think about it, right, why are we so biased to Americans getting sick and then drugging them? There's no ideology there. That's pure corruption. Like, just clinically, if you subsidize a better whole food diet for a diabetic or obese American, they're gonna, like, people follow incentives. And if you work with the FDA to revise the GRAS standards and get some chemicals out of our food, and this is another thing on the regulation, we should not be poisoning our population. It's bigger than ideology. We should not. The FDA should not be recommending poisonous ingredients. Now, then it gets to, like, kind of, okay, what's that going to impact going to be on industry? Is that going to raise food prices? That's on Congress. Okay, Congress has underwritten trillions of dollars, when you add them all up, of terrible subsidies that have impacted our food and our health. Like, they have completely been asleep at the wheel. Let the American people, they have the power of the purse. So again, the FDA and this USDA, I believe their job is to explain to the American people when we have toxic, demonstrably toxic chemicals in our food and are recommending even those chemicals. That's their job. It's Congress's job. Now, they'll scream bloody murder, the food industry, of, like, this is going to raise food prices, et cetera, et cetera. We have to understand we should be working constructively with the food industry and Congress, because this is not a free market right now. And I do, obviously, as these changes happen, we're going to have a deep conversation with all stakeholders to reform the incentive structure and the subsidy structure that is propagating our current system.
Well, here's my question, and this is, I know we're feeling a lot of optimism. I mean, I am
Yeah.
still in disbelief that Donald Trump won the election, not because I didn't think he could, but because, I mean, he survived 2 assassination attempts. How many attempts to weaponize the government against him, this lawfare, a mainstream media that was biased against him, and he won. He not only won the Electoral College, he won in a sweeping victory of the popular vote. I'm delighted by this. I could not be more delighted that there's been this marriage between Make America Great and Make America Healthy Again. People that watch the show know I'm crunchy. Not because I was ever a hippie or anything like that, not because I was in California with all the fruits and nuts for all those years, but because I was forced to. After being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease where there was no solutions given to me, I was forced to reevaluate what I ate, to use supplements to help manage the chronic inflammation in my body. And because of that, I ended up learning about the chronic disease crisis and, what corruption there is in our healthcare system that leads. I'm not isolated in my experience. I am so delighted that these two men are working together. I brought a big smile to my face to see that video where RFK was saying, listen, I got to know Trump. This man that I thought I despised, I think is an extraordinary leader because he's so confident. But all of that optimism aside for one moment, given the enormity of what this is, how much money is on the other side, what opposition do you expect from the FDA, the CDC, big
Yeah.
pharma, big food? Because they're not just going to say, oh, Trump won, the people gave Trump a mandate, we're just going to roll over it. They are going to fight back, most likely not fairly. What do you expect them to do?
Okay. So at the highest level, what RFK and President Trump are saying have trillions of dollars of ramifications for various industries. And I think they're talking about an absolute revolution in American growth and prosperity, but that's going to involve disruption. To unleash that growth, it's going to involve disruption to institutions that have held Americans back and have rigged our system. So there's many forces, obviously, as President Trump said on Joe Rogan, big pharma in this instance is absolutely giving him calls and coming in so many different directions to influence this agenda. What I think we have a generational opportunity for is that the voters are on President Trump's side, and no president in modern American history has, I think, cared less or been more inoculated from the special interests. There are people, as President Trump has said, that are trying to influence him to not go bold on health, to not empower RFK. Those are shadowy people that represent pharma that haven't driven President Trump one vote. I think Bobby Kennedy and Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard and this coalition President Trump built have created a new coalition in American politics, which has closed the gender gap with independents, with Latinos, with Black men, with young people. I mean, it's truly an astounding coalition of people that have gotten behind President Trump. So I think that's why we should have optimism. I think President Trump, the promise of his presidency and his promise to voters is he's going to empower people like RFK, and he's going to take the blowback from the special interests. Why are we optimistic too with the inevitable deep state reaction to this? We've got the presidential microphone and pulpit. I think what I constantly hear from members of Congress is that they kind of want this stuff done as humans. I mean, we all understand the FDA shouldn't be funded by pharma 75% and totally co-opted in research. But they always say, it's not the national issue. It's like the corruption kind of happens because there's not a spotlight on it. By having a spotlight from President Trump and hopefully Bobby Kennedy, I think it draws in. And these things are, I think that's why people are waking up, being radicalized. It's unimpeachably bad. Like the stuff we're talking about just literally makes no sense. It just does not make sense for our children's food to be covered in crude oil that the USDA says is healthy. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. So if we could just keep up the spotlight, have good lawyers, have kind of an attitude that we're going to just do it, that we're going to stand up to the scrutiny. You bring these things to light. This is not a monolithic, all-powerful. This is not an all-powerful industry. Sorry about that. I'll say it again. This is not an all-powerful industry. They can be disrupted. So that's what gives me hope. The voters and President Trump's microphone are on our side.
Listen, this is the final thing. I'll let you go here because we could talk all day. I know a lot of viewers of the show and listeners are longtime Make America Healthy Again. Some people are new to this and people just are eating this up, and I love to see it. But this is my wish list for Make America Healthy Again. Right. I want to see big pharma be liable for their products, especially when it comes to vaccines. I want to see studies, which is something
RFK has talked about, and certainly on the list. It doesn't make much sense that that's the one. I can't speak for it, but that's a very good idea.
And in a sense, that'll self-correct the rest of the industry. But I want to see the CDC recommendations changed. I don't want the CDC to be recommending 72 shots. I want to see studies that are done ethically, done by people that don't have a conflict of interest or a profit motive. And I want to know all the details of the study. I don't want to see studies that are like showing, I think it might have been Gardasil or hepatitis that showed the vaccine, but the control group that was injected with saline actually had aluminum in it. So it wasn't a true control group. I don't want to see that. I want to see in our food, I want to see pesticides and chemicals and synthetic dyes and brominated oils. I want to see that banned. I want that not just to be the American people's choice. I want things that actively harm us because it is a net negative for our society. I want it to be completely banned. I want the CDC and the FDA, people that work there, I don't want them to be able to work at Big Pharma afterward, at least for an extended period of time. I want people to be held criminally liable when they are lying to the American people, especially when people's children have been hurt. I want to see university labs that are doing research. I want a spotlight on that because people talk about science and scientific studies. You mentioned earlier, most of that is pharma R&D. So they have an incentive not to cure the underlying problem, but to just produce a pharmaceutical. That's our taxpayer money that's paying for that. And I want in medical schools for naturopathic, homeopathic, chiropractic, all of these different disciplines of medicine to be reintroduced so that people's holistic health is actually addressed versus just coming there to get a prescription for a little pill in a white bottle. I also want our healthcare systems to be forced to publish self-pay prices so that we're not tied to the insurance companies so that people can structure it themselves. And finally, I think the food pyramid should change. So this is my wish list, Calley. This is what I think would revolutionize it. You have talked about almost everything on that list. It's not something that's new to you.
That's one of the best summaries I've ever heard, Liz. It truly. And I'm honestly, we're going to transcribe. I'm going to transcribe what you just said and make sure you hit on the exact principle. I mean, we both feel it. There is a true opportunity the next year. And I think everything you said has 90% support, and it's just common sense. Let's stay in close touch, and just to your listeners, there's real coalition of people that are really working to support President Trump and provide recommendations to him. There is zero, as Bobby Kennedy said, and I can just tell you from seeing it, there's a great rapport, a great alignment on this, and I think a great opportunity. But if everyone can just continue to support, stay on it, we have a generational opportunity here, and we're very optimistic. So, Liz, I'll stay in close touch with you on that list. And I think we're in Palm Beach, putting our heads down, getting action plans ready to be bold. I mean, we don't want to be incremental here. We want to do unimpeachable, bold things, like you just said.
And we're so excited, and I think I speak for everyone watching the show. We are ready to crowdfund that new HHS facility in Guam to ship off all those corrupt bureaucrats from Washington, D.C. Calley, I will let you go. Guys, go read his book. He and his sister wrote a great book. Follow him on X. He's a great follow. And Calley Means, thank you for being on the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Liz. We'll be in close touch.